What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. Hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you are feeling holly and jolly. Christmas is a week away as I put this video together for you. It is Wednesday, Happy Hump Day, December the 18th, 2024. Almost said 2025. You never have that problem. You never say the next year too soon. You always end up riding the old year for far too long. It's always usually February by the time I stop making that mistake. But Christmas a week away, so I hope all is going well for you and yours, whoever you are, wherever you are. I hope the holiday season is treating you wonderfully. My friends at Homage treated me wonderfully, as you can see. Got my holiday crew neck here. I tweeted, I socialed the links to get all sorts of wonderful goodies that Homage hooked me up with. I'm a big fan of Homage and everything they have to offer. So if you're still looking for some sort of gift, I promise you these are stylish and incredibly comfortable. Like I hope the content of this video is. If you haven't yet, by the way, subscribe here to the Blog of the Boys YouTube channel, por favor, and you can follow me on social media as mentioned, Twitter, Instagram, Threads at RJ Ochoa, TikTok, rj.ochoa, email rj.ochoa at sbnation.com. You can leave a comment down below and we'll do our very best to get to those as well. We're here today to discuss I guess something, if you are in the Christmas spirit, that is on your wish list, I suppose. We call these rooting guides, but given that they do generally pop up around this time of year, maybe we need to start calling them wish lists. But nevertheless, it's time for our Week 16 rooting guide for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, before we get there, I'm going to tell you that like we had last week, we've got two this week. Okay. I understand that there are some people out there who are still holding on to hope, who are still team playoffs, maybe somehow, possibly. Dumb and Dumber, you're telling me there's a chance. We've got that version. We also have the version for Team Tank. I know that there are a lot of you who want to see the Cowboys get as solid of a draft pick as they possibly can. As of entering Week 16, this moment in time, the Cowboys currently sit 14th overall in the 2025 NFL draft order. So if you're looking to improve upon that, we've got the recipe on how to get there as well. Let's get to it. This is the Team Playoffs rooting guide. Again, we have both. I promise you. We're going to get to the other one in just a moment. By the way, these will be all over my socials. As I mentioned, these will be at blogontheboys.com if you want to kind of, check them off as we go along throughout the week. We've got a lot of football coming at us starting on Thursday Night Football, then the college football playoff. We've got obviously Saturday playoff games, Saturday NFL games, and of course the Sunday slate that culminates in Sunday Night Football when the Cowboys play. So team playoffs. Now we're rooting for the Giants over the Falcons, the Panthers over the Cardinals, Rams over the Jets, the Eagles. I know it sucks. You can tell me that you don't want to root for the Eagles all you want, but if you want to see the Cowboys in the playoffs, you have to root for this, okay? Eagles over the Commanders, the Vikings over the Seahawks, the Dolphins over the Niners, and obviously the Cowboys over the Buccaneers. The explanation for all these things is pretty simplistic at this point in time. If you're unaware, the Cowboys are in a position where they are, if they're going to reach the playoffs, going to have to be the third wild card. There's no other way about it. And I was opening this up in the background so that you can see it. Let me get this off of your screen. Let me put something else up on your screen. All right, here we go. What you're looking at right now are the NFL standings over at ESPN. And as you can see, the Detroit Lions currently hold the 1 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles the 2 seed, the Buccaneers are leading the NFC South. I know the Falcons are moving to Michael Penix Jr., but I think that Tampa's going to win that division. At the very least, if the Cowboys, win on Sunday, that, would make the conversation interesting. But the Rams currently lead the NFC West, and that's going to play a factor in our discussion here in a moment. The Vikings have already clinched a playoff berth. They could win the NFC North, but obviously they're at the very least, at the very worst, going to be a wild card. I think we all think that 3 NFC North teams are going to make the playoffs, as the Green Bay Packers are on the verge of clinching a playoff berth themselves. So if the Cowboys are going to get in, it's going to be that third wild card spot. Because if you think about it, Green Bay's got a hold on the second. They have 10 wins. The Cowboys have 6. All right, there are 3 games left. So the Cowboys mathematically cannot get to that second wild card spot, but they can technically, mathematically catch the Commanders in that third wild card spot, and they need everybody else around that spot to collapse as well. Obviously, that is incredibly unlikely, but nevertheless, if you want to, believe that it's possible, it could happen. I don't know that I have that open in front of you, that weird drop-down menu. That was strange. But either way, the point here, let me get this off your screen and put this back up. Let me move over here. That's why we're rooting against the Falcons, because the Falcons are a threat to that third wild card spot, as are the Buccaneers if they don't wind up winning the NFC South. But The reality is the Cowboys are in a position where they have to hope against hope. They have to hope for a miracle, miracle, miracle. And so we're rooting against the Falcons and the Buccaneers. We're rooting against the Cardinals because they too are a threat for this third wild card spot. This is really the reason why we're rooting against the teams that we're rooting against. But we are rooting for the Rams, as you can see. Now, this might be a matter of personal opinion, or it is a matter of personal opinion, I should say, and yours might be different. But at Blogging the Boys, myself and Jess Haney, who writes the Rooting Guide article at our site every week, we believe that it's more likely that the Rams will win the NFC West than the Seahawks. I think that that's at least fair. Maybe you disagree again. Obviously, the Geno Smith situation impacts that discussion and conversation. That being said, somebody has to win that division. So again, if you're living in the scope of wanting to see the Cowboys in the playoffs, one of them is secured a playoff spot because they're going to win that division. So let's pretend it's the Rams. Then all of a sudden, the Seahawks cannot be a contender for that third wildcard spot that we've been talking about for a moment here. So we're rooting for the Rams to put distance between themselves and their division rivals, Seattle Seahawks friends, so that the Rams win the division and the Seahawks plummet beneath the Cowboys. That's why we're rooting for the Rams. We're rooting for the Eagles, which sucks, I know, against the Commanders because the Commanders are the biggest threat for that third wildcard spot right now. And the Cowboys partly control their own destiny against the Commanders specifically, at least because they still host them in the regular season finale. We're rooting against the Seahawks, as mentioned, because they would be a threat to the third wildcard spot if they don't wind up winning the NFC West. And we're rooting against the Niners because they too are a threat to the third wildcard spot. This is pretty simplistic at this point in time because the Cowboys have such a specific path to the playoffs. Like I said, they need the team holding that third wildcard spot, which at the moment is Washington, and everybody else around them, which is Atlanta, Arizona, Seattle, if they don't win the NFC West, San Francisco, I suppose, if they don't win the NFC West as well. We need them all to totally and completely collapse. So that is where we are at when it comes to a playoffs standpoint. But let's move on to Team Tank. That's why so many of you have shown up here. This is much more complicated. Maybe not complicated, but at least more difficult, more inconceivable, more impossible. There are a few things, though, that we need to discuss. So let's put this on your screen for a moment here. This is the current NFL draft order, thanks to our friends at Tankathon. As you can see, the Dallas Cowboys sit right there at number 14 overall. So basically what we're rooting for is for all 13 of these teams to lose, right? That makes sense because we want them to fall down the draft order and the Dallas Cowboys to climb up. Now, the problem is you've got some games between these teams, right? That's going to impact the draft order the way that the Cowboys games against Cincinnati and Carolina did in recent weeks. So it's a little bit complicated and it's a little bit convoluted, and we have to, just peel back a couple of layers and explain one or two different things. All right, so let's put this on the screen for you now. We're rooting for. Now we're rooting for these teams. Some of these things coincide, by the way. We're rooting for the Giants because they currently are at the very top of the draft order, and we're rooting against the Falcons, as you can see in our playoffs guide. So these things kind of line up. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes they diametrically oppose one another. But beyond all of that, we also want to see the Giants weaken their own draft position. We don't want them in position to be able to take the quarterback they want, whether that's going to be Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. We want the Giants to be stuck forever. So that's part of what this is, obviously. We want the Panthers to win because they're ahead of the Cowboys. We want the Bears to win because they're ahead of the Cowboys. This one's a little bit complicated, though. Let me put this up on your screen once more time. We're rooting for the Bengals over the Browns. And maybe you don't find this to be complicated. Maybe you think it's whatever, but let me zoom in right here. All right, now let's put this on your screen. So as you can see, Dallas currently sits at 14 overall relative to the draft order. Cleveland sits 7th overall, and Cincinnati sits 13th overall. Now, you would think that conventionally we would want the team who's further up the draft order to fall, right? Because we want the Cowboys to climb as high as possible. The reality of the situation is there are only 3 games left in this season, right? So even if Cleveland were to lose out, and even if even if Cleveland were to win out, and even if Dallas were to lose out, that would still put them both at 6 wins. The immediate tiebreaker, that green column right there, is strength of schedule. It's very, very, very unlikely that this is going to happen, obviously, and therefore the Dallas is going to jump ahead of Cleveland. If your sights were set on a top 5 pick or a top 10 pick, even at this point in time, the fact that the Cowboys have won 3 of their last 4 games has probably annoyed you greatly. And so ultimately, at this point, we're just trying to make the best batch of lemonade that we can. And that's why we want to see, at the very least, Dallas maybe climb ahead of Cincinnati, maybe climb ahead of Indianapolis, maybe climb ahead of Miami. These are the attainable draft spots that we could ultimately procure, maybe get as high. I mean, in the dreamiest of dream worlds, as 10, but somewhere around 11 and 12 would, I think, be a significant accomplishment at this point in time, given the fact that there are only 3 games left in the regular season. So as we go back over here, this is why we're rooting for the Bengals over the Browns and the Colts over the Titans. Even though Tennessee and Cleveland are further up the draft order, again, the reality, or at least hypothetical reality, of Dallas catching those 2 teams is significantly low. So we want to see Cincinnati and Indianapolis. Those teams are much closer within range to Dallas. Those are the teams we want to see fall, so the Cowboys can climb up just a little bit higher. As mentioned, we're rooting for the Jets because we want to see them fall down. The same thing for the Patriots. The Jaguars are a little bit closer in the NFL draft order to the Cowboys and the Raiders. That's really what this is about. This one is kind of really inconsequential. As you see, we're talking about 2 teams currently in the top 4. But again, in a technical sense, Jacksonville is the most obtainable relative to the 2 teams that we're talking about here. That's why we're rooting for Jacksonville. We're rooting for Miami, as mentioned. We're rooting against the Cowboys. I know that feels uncomfortable for some people. Some people don't like that verbiage. Some people don't like saying it in that way. I'm sorry. That's just the reality of the situation. And finally, we're rooting for New Orleans over Green Bay because, as I move over here one more time, they are right there at 10 overall. This is a dream upon dreams, like I mentioned, but it is technically possible. So these are the things, again, when you look at this is very, very, very unlikely. Okay, I need to stress this because the playoff guide, is incredibly unlikely, right? This is a very, very unlikely thing. But this, I would argue, is even more unlikely in terms of probabilities because we're actually, in a literal sense, talking about the worst teams in the NFL. And in some of the cases, they're playing some of the best teams in the NFL, right? Like, it's not inconceivable, for example, that the Giants could win in Michael Penix's first start, right? It's pretty inconceivable that the Bears could beat the Lions. It's pretty inconceivable that the Patriots could beat the Bills, right? Those things are incredibly unlikely, but you never know. I mean, it's not impossible, certainly, for the Bengals or the Colts to win. In fact, I would argue that that's pretty likely. And so that would help us out in some way, shape, or form. It's certainly possible that the Dolphins could beat the Niners. Maybe the Saints could pull off a surprise. I mean, you just don't know in these kinds of things, but this is what we're rooting for in a technical sense. So I hope that has been somewhat helpful for you as I make myself big again. We have a lot of things coming out this week on the channel. Today is Wednesday. Tomorrow we'll have something fun. And then Friday we have our Madden simulation. Saturday we have our Dallas Cowboys in Espanol episode. And so, yeah, it is a very, very fun time. So I hope if I don't talk to you between now and then that you have a very Merry Christmas, although I hope that I will because Sunday is a post-game show. So make sure you're on the lookout for that at the very least. It'll be late because the Cowboys play on Sunday Night Football. But I hope all your teams, whoever you picked in college football, in the playoff, in bowl games, in the NFL slate, if you're still in your pick'em or your survivor pool, whatever, I hope it's all going well. Good luck in the fantasy playoffs if you've wound up in them yourself. I just hope that whatever you got going on is wonderful. Holly and jolly and full of Yuletide greetings is what I was trying to say. So thanks so much for hanging out, everybody, and we will see you next time.